You're recording? So, peace and love, peace and love. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome into Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today's guest is a living example that transformation is possible. That no matter how far you've fallen or how lost you feel, your story can be rewritten. Wesley Farnsworth is an author, speaker, branding expert, and a former U.S. Air Force photographer whose lens once captured everything from presidential inaugurations to life in war zones. But behind the camera, Wesley was fighting his own battles with shame, addiction, and the search for purpose. Through faith, humility, and the hard work of healing, he discovered something powerful that failure doesn't define us, it refines us. And that realization became the heartbeat of his new book, The Blueprint of Becoming, a practical guide to faith, failure, and finding your way forward. Today, Wesley helps people and organizations tell better stories, not just through branding and design, but through living with honesty, purpose, and hope. His mission is simple but profound to help others believe that no matter where you've been, change is possible and a new story is waiting to be written. It's an honor to welcome to the podcast Wesley Farnsworth, and thank you so much for your service. I know Veterans Day is tomorrow, and welcome to the show, Wesley.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much for that. Could you tell us a little bit about your story? You know,
Yeah, so my story begins, growing up as a pastor's kid, uh, living. My dad's a full time evangelist, so he traveled quite often, speaking at a lot of various churches, and as a result of that, um, I grew up in the church, and as a pastor's kid, I kind of had some self-imposed restrictions or self-imposed ideals of what I should be like, what I should think, what I should say, what I should do, um, all in an effort to make sure that I reflect positively on my parents and on the church and on God. And so, as a result of that, I became what I like to refer to as a master chameleon, and I became very good at blending into any environment that I would come in contact with. I could have a conversation with anybody on just about anything and fit right in.
you can switch it up real
Um,
quick.
Absolutely. And so, as a result of that, um, I became what's known as codependent. In codependency, essentially, if you're not familiar with the term, is caring more about what other people think of you than what you think about yourself, and more importantly, what God thinks of you. And so, that codependency, I didn't know then that it was codependency. To me, it was just the way I was. Um, and so, but now as I'm older and I've been able to look back, I realized that codependency is what led into my teen years, to where I was out with friends one day and somebody said something that I was unfamiliar with, and um, being the codependent I didn't want to feel left out. I wanted to be accepted because they were all laughing. They thought it was funny. And so I laughed along, pretending like I knew what it was. But inside, I was terrified that they were going to find out that I didn't know and I was going to be rejected.
Yeah.
And so that night, I went home and I searched that term. And that term opened up the doors to an addiction, or what would become an addiction to pornography. And it was 20 years later before I was finally able to beat that addiction, because growing up, I didn't know who to talk to. I thought looking at the stuff was okay at the time. I could, I knew deep down it wasn't, because I grew up in the church, but I told myself I could stop whenever I want, that it was just a curiosity. It was so that I could be informed when I was talking to friends that didn't believe in God. I justified it.
Yeah.
Essentially, I justified it to myself.
Now, what age did
Um,
that addiction start at?
I was about 15, roughly.
15.
And so, um, yeah, so I grew up with it. It kind of became a part of me and into my adulthood. And then one day I was um, sitting at church, and now, mind you, I had tried to stop many times on my own, because I knew it was wrong, but for one reason or another, I would go back to it. Um, so fast forward to around 2019, and I'm sitting in church, and the church mentions from the stage that they're getting ready to start this new ministry called Celebrate Recovery. And I remember hearing them talk about it and how, only 1 in 3 people that go to Celebrate Recovery are there for something like alcohol or drugs, which is what most people think of when they think about recovery groups. But the rest of us are there for things like overeating or addictions to things like pornography or broken relationships or low self-image or things like that. Essentially, it's for the rest of us that are just human and have things that we want to work on, to better ourselves. So it's for anybody with any kind of hurt, habit, or hang up. And I remember hearing, I was like, man, I should probably go to that. That sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll find success with that group. And so I kind of sat on it for a little while. Going to that group means I would go and have to admit to somebody else, to another person, that I wasn't perfect and that I struggled with something. And as a codependent, that terrified me. And so I kind of sat there. And eventually I worked up the courage and I went to the group. And that night I was accepted and I was loved on. And my life began to change at that point. And I began my journey to recovery.
And that was in 2019, you said?
Yep, that was around 2019.
And how old were you at that time?
Oh, I would have been... I was in my early 30s.
Okay. So you spent 15 to almost your mid 30s to, addicted to pornography.
Yep. So, yeah. So I was in a recovery group one night, and we heard a testimony, and they said something in the testimony, and I wish to this day I knew what that was. But they said something that kind of sparked this idea in my mind. And as the evening went on, this idea kind of kept replaying. And actually it was a scene. If you've ever seen the movie A Knight's Tale,
sounds familiar.
In the movie, it's Owen Wilson, stars in the movie, if I remember correctly. But in the movie, there's a scene where, a knight is parading down the road and there's a young boy in the crowd and he's like, Dad, I want to be him when I grow up. And the dad's like, of course, son, you can do that. You can do anything you want to, like any parent would, encouraging the kid to dream big and to do things. But of course, like anywhere else, there's going to be a looker-loo, a guy in the crowd nearby hears this conversation and gives what anybody would do, and that's give unsolicited advice. And he says, you can't do that. You're just a peasant boy. You can't transform. You can't change your stars. And so that scene kind of replayed in my head a few times. And as it was replaying, I kind of felt like this. I kind of felt God tell me, as when you are addicted to something or before you are saved, you are like that boy in the crowd. You're just a peasant. Like you have big dreams, but you're stuck. Like you want to change something. But when you give that addiction or you give that struggle to me, when you come to know me as your savior, you are transformed. Your stars transform, and you become royalty. You become a part of my family. You become a part of the kingdom. Yeah. And so that idea is kind of what started this whole journey with the book, because my brain just kept exploring this idea of changing your stars. And that's where in the book I talk about a constellation of stars and how ships navigate by the stars, and how in our life, everything that we do, our decisions, our jobs, our relationships, everything is a star in our constellation, our life's constellation. And we need to ensure that we have the proper North Star, which would be God, to ensure that we're steering or navigating our life appropriately and in line with what he wants us to be and wants us to do in order to become And so that's kind of where the title, The Blueprint of Becoming, comes from,
Yeah.
and what brought it to where we are today.
No, that's powerful. That, like you said, you spent 20 years and you're sitting there and you join a group, and then it's sort of like a light bulb goes off that I can make a change. And like you said, a lot of people think addiction. When they think addiction, it's drugs and alcohol, and there's so much as a society that people are addicted to: cigarettes, being codependent.
Yeah.
There's so much, and people don't think of that.
Well, even today, I mean, just simple things like doom scrolling
Oh yeah, it's
is an addiction. Like
yeah.
people are addicted to just doom scrolling social media and watching all these mini videos. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah. You see these young kids nowadays. I mean, they come on the job site where I am, young kids, and they don't want to do much except stare at that phone. It's like they got a blank stare straight and they just all day long, it's tough, it's tough. They got instant gratification right there in their hands, whether it's pornography, whether it's social media, whether it's, it's a little bit of everything, and I think it's depleting the intelligence of a lot of these young kids that are coming up, because they're so dependent or codependent on the phones and social media and all that stuff.
yep.
It's tough. We're gonna get into some questions. I know you wrote the book. When did it come out? Just
It
recently.
was a Yep, it was officially released on October 14th, so just under a month ago.
Perfect. And you can get that on Amazon.
Yep, you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes Noble, anywhere books are sold. It's available both paperback and ebook.
Perfect.
And if you go out to wesleyfarnsworth.com/start, I have links to where you can buy the book there, and I have some freebies and all kinds of stuff there that you can use to find more information about the book and myself.
Perfect. And that's the Blueprint of Becoming is the name of the book, a practical guide to faith, failure, and finding your way forward by Wesley Farnsworth. We're just gonna start off. I know you didn't talk about it much when you were introducing yourself, but you served as a senior airman. You were deployed from the 633rd Air Base Wing. You served as from the Public Affairs Office at the Joint Base Langley and Eustis out of Virginia. I know you served in Afghanistan, where you were deployed as a military photographer and public affairs specialist. What was it
Correct.
like over there in Afghanistan?
Yeah, Afghanistan is a beautiful country. The people there are very friendly. For the most part, it's a very hospitable country, and culture. And every time you go somewhere, you're their friend, and they call you their friend, and you'll be offered tea everywhere you go. And it's a beautiful country. It was a great, um, it was a really rewarding deployment. I was part of what was called a provincial reconstruction team. And so we went into the country and provided counsel and advice to the local government, and helped them make sure that they were established for success. And then we would also go alongside and um, we would inspect things that were being built, like schools and buildings and roadways, to ensure that they were being done properly and corners weren't being cut and the government was being ripped off.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of our role. And so my job as a photographer was to go along on all of these trips out and photograph the meetings, photograph the engagements that we had with the local people, and just essentially tell the story of this country being rebuilt.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing time, very rewarding, and I loved it.
Yeah. So as the PRT team, right? I think I could be wrong though. So you would go out and just basically make sure that these provinces that you were going into were almost essentially ready to be run by themselves, almost.
Yeah, we provided the counsel and stuff to ensure that they were good. So when the transition took place, they had the best chance for success that they could have, to be able to do everything themselves.
And that must have been rewarding, just not from from a military standpoint, but a human standpoint. A lot of people don't think about it, or, you said the people were beautiful, the country's beautiful. I think a lot of stuff gets lost in translation when you hear about Afghanistan and you hear about the government over there, the Taliban regime. that everyone thinks that Afghanistan itself is just all Taliban. That's how they are, and you're telling us that the people you encountered, the provinces that you were in, they were nothing but hospitable and they were great people. Um, and that's awesome to hear, because you don't hear that side of the war often, from guys that have lived it, guys that have served over there, and it's special, So I know you just answered what the Afghan people were like. They welcomed you. Um, they always received you. You said they would always offer you some tea, or how was their tea over there?
I didn't drink a whole lot. I'm not a tea person.
Yeah,
So asking me what tea is like is asking me what, what like drinking charcoal is like. Like I'm just not a tea drinker.
yeah,
But I would always take at least one sip because you don't want to be rude.
yeah.
Um,
Now, did you
so
eat some of their food? Would they prepare you guys food and stuff?
occasionally we would go to meals.
Okay.
And it was delicious. I actually loved the meal. The main meal that they would serve you was called palau, and it's a rice based dish that has raisins and carrots in it.
Okay.
And it's cooked for a long period of time, and it's very juicy or very tender and sweet with the raisins.
Okay.
And then it's traditionally served with like lamb,
Okay.
or some other kind of meat that you'd put on top, and it's absolutely delicious.
Is that the one meal you missed from over there?
It is actually.
Yeah.
Anytime I can find an Afghan restaurant here stateside, I go and get that dish because it was so good.
Yeah. So, what was some of your lasting memories from serving in Afghanistan?
Hmm. I just would say the people.
Yeah.
Not only the people I was serving with, but the people we interacted with. Just especially the kids, just being able to go out, and the kids are just so young and curious, and they've never seen an American airman or soldier or marine before, and so they're just so curious, and it just was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, did they speak any English at all? Some of them, or broken English?
Some did, but for the most part, they didn't. We had translators.
Translators, yeah. And the kids were just they were just happy to see you guys and inquisitive about what you guys are doing here, and so you
Yep.
probably just tell them we're here to help you guys out, get the get the city up and going, get the and keep you guys safe.
Yeah, we didn't do a whole lot of interacting with the general public.
Yeah.
Every now and then we would, but it wasn't an everyday thing.
Yeah. So when you went to these towns, so it wasn't really the general public. So it was sort of like the would it be like the leaders of the leaders of the tribe? Yeah, you would go.
Yeah, we'd go in and have meetings with the village elders, basically.
Yeah. Now, is that how their villages are run over there? How their little towns are run with the village elders? You got to see them first, and then everything goes from there.
Yeah, I mean it's just like a city when you think of something stateside. You have your local mayors, and then you've got your governors and all. As you move up in the government, it's the same type of thing. Their village elders are like the mayors, and then
Did you ever have any issues with the village elders, or did you always get along with them? Now,
nope, nope, always welcoming.
always welcoming, always hospitable.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So, and then the last question is, what was one of your favorite photos you took in Afghanistan while in Afghanistan?
Mhm. I'd say it's probably a photo was during one of our leader engagements, and I have this awesome photo of one of the village elders. Just it's really hard to explain, but he kind of fills the right side of the photo, and then in the background you can just see the room full of the other village elders, and it's a really cool photo.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So you must have a lot of great, lasting memories. And like I said, I loved what you said with it wasn't just the people you served with that was the pleasure, it was also the Afghan people, which is, that touches the heart because a lot of times the media and everyone loves to portray them as, not good people. So from someone that served over there and was there, and, I appreciate your service and I appreciate everything you did over there. So,
Yeah. The media will tell you whatever they think will sell the stories.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I take what the media says with a grain of salt.
No doubt about it, especially nowadays where it's, they want to pit us against each other and they just want us fighting. Well, the real stories are going on behind the scenes, and don't, it's like the man behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to me, you know.
Yep. Yep.
So we're gonna get into some questions. So when you look back on your earlier life, what were warning signs or patterns do you now recognize that you couldn't see then?
Yeah. Looking back, I think one of the biggest patterns was just performance, trying to earn acceptance from people instead of living it, always needing to look okay, which meant that I ended up ignoring the cracks that were actually forming underneath all of that. And so, some of the warning signs were, maybe isolation or secrecy. And, I just would end up telling myself, I'm fine. Well, really slowly, I was kind of drifting and losing authenticity. And so that's kind of where I would say were some of the things as I look back, warning signs and patterns that I've been able to identify.
Yeah. So in what role did vulnerability play in your healing process? And how do you encourage others to practice it safely?
Yeah, vulnerability honestly saved me. Um, the moment that I was able to get honest with myself, with God, and with other people, then everything began to change. Healing doesn't happen in hiding. You have to be able to be vulnerable. So you, the key though is you have to be able to do it safely. I tell people find a safe person, find safe people that you can talk to, not perfect people because they don't exist. But at least safe people. For me, that was in Celebrate Recovery. Vulnerability is scary, but it's often because we're afraid of rejection,
Yeah.
and so. But when you can share your truth with the right community, and you don't find rejection, you find grace, then transformation can begin.
Can begin, yeah. And the biggest thing I think you said there was you got to be honest. You got to be honest with yourself, and don't do it in hiding, and you know, and just hit it head on, because change can't start until you get honest with yourself.
Yep.
So, how did faith evolve for you through seasons of shame, failure, and recovery?
Yeah, faith used to be a rule book, to me in a lot of ways. But over time, it became more of the relationship. You know, the shame side of things told me, when I did stuff that God was disappointed in me. But faith showed me that He was actually fighting for me. And so recovery taught me that faith isn't about how strong I am; it's about how surrendered I'm willing to be. And so now I see faith as a process of becoming and not perfecting who God created me to be.
Yeah, oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. What's one belief or mindset you had to completely unlearn in order to move forward?
That faith disqualifies you.
Yeah,
I used to think that once you mess up, you're done. And so, you couldn't do anything after that. But then I began to realize, that God doesn't discard the broken things. He takes them and he rebuilds them. And so I had to unlearn perfection and embrace the process. And that shift changed everything about how I lead, how I love, and how I live.
yeah. And how did your family and relationships influence your path toward wholeness and faith renewal?
My family has been a source of both pain and healing. My parents modeled grace even when I didn't understand it, and I had to learn boundaries along the way. And so relationships forced me to face parts of myself that in isolation, it where or relationships forced me to face parts of me that isolation allowed me to ignore.
Yeah.
And that's when change started happening.
Yeah, and I feel that often, like you said, isolation, where you can isolate yourself and you can, keep yourself away from everybody. You can keep yourself away from the problem that you're facing, whether it's through, binge watching some TV, sleeping, getting up, going to work, and not facing it head on. Because until you're ready, you're not going to face it. You're not going to be truthful about it. You know,
That's right.
I think you said it perfectly in the beginning where you said, I'm okay. It's all right. When in reality, a lot of people don't do that deep soul searching where there's enough time in the day. I know there's only 24 hours in a day, but there's enough time for you to sit there and procrastinate and push it aside and say, you know what, I'll confront that problem tomorrow.
Yep.
But we know that tomorrow's never going to come because we're going to push it off to the next day or next week. And I think it's about getting honest with yourself, getting honest with God. And like you said, that's when the change and the transformation can start. You know,
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Until you're willing to be honest with yourself, then you don't stand a chance
not at all.
of change. And that's kind of where, it wasn't until I was able to be honest with myself that um, that this addiction is an addiction, and it's not something that I can just stop on my own, because I tried that many times. And until I was able to admit that to myself, then I wasn't going to be able to change anything.
Change anything. Yeah. And I think the hottest part becomes you have to dig deep. You have to, a little bit of soul searching when you want to confront it, but you also have to be truthful and you have to be truthful, honest. And when you're ready to confront it, you will. But until then, you'll push it off till the cows come home and then some, because unless you're ready to be truthful, then you're never gonna confront that what's bothering you or what's the issue, what the addiction is.
Yep.
We have a
Yep.
lot of it here in Boston where we have a lot of addicts, and it's tough. It's tough. But I try to tell people we can only meet them where they are right now. We can't force them into rehab. We can't force them to get treatment. We can't force them to do anything. You got to meet them where they are. Maybe have a small conversation that can change their day today. But until they're truthful with themselves and they want to be honest with themselves, when they dig deep and they search, deep into their souls and really want help, that's the only time when they're going to get it is when they really want it, when they really want that help. So,
Yep.
so what did your years as a military photographer teach you about seeing people, not just photographing?
Yeah. The military taught me discipline, but photography taught me a lot about empathy. Behind every uniform, if you will, is a story. There's a story there of fear, of hope, of loss, of love, of different upbringings. There's just so many stories there, and so it made me realize that ministry and real creativity are both about seeing people fully,
Yeah.
not just as subjects, not just as a uniform, but as a person, as a soul, and essentially not judging a book by its cover.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of my biggest things. So for season two, I pivoted. Season one, I talked politics because that's what I do and talked about local issues here in Boston. But I pivoted season two. And one of my biggest things where I had a aha moment was there's 8 billion people in the world, right? And what I'm trying to do is bring everybody's story, whether it's I end up interviewing a million people, whatever it may be. But every week I'm going to bring someone new on, and introduce them to the world. Let them tell their story, their struggles, their trials, their tribulations. And I think, my goal is for an hour a week when people listen to the interview, where it can take them out of their ordinary world, their chaos, or maybe peace, what they're going through in life. And they can just listen and drift away and listen to, for example, when your story comes up, they can listen to Wesley's story and listen to what he has to say and what he's learned and what taught him, and where he came from and, what it was like being in the military, what it was like, giving himself over to God to beat his addiction. So
Mhm.
I think it's the biggest thing is letting people tell their story. Like when I send a message to people, they're like, well, what's the interview going to be about? And I said, well, it's your story. I want you to come on and tell your story. It's not my story,
Yep.
you know? I'm
Yep.
almost just like the conduit to your story. I'm just helping you bring it out.
Yep.
So so I,
Love it.
this is a little bit of not off topic, but what made you did you do photography before the military?
I did not actually. I it's kind of a long story and funny story, but I'll give you a cliff note version. So when you join the military, you go out and you go to the central processing station, and you fill out a dream sheet of what jobs you'd like to do, and based on your ASVAB score. And I got there, and they said, "Okay, here's your list of jobs that you can choose from." And um, I kind of saw the photography job, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds pretty cool." And they were like, "Don't put that down. You're not going to get it. It's a really small career field, and I've never seen it drop. You're not going to get it." And I said, "All right." So didn't put that down as my number one job. I put it down as my number two job.
Yeah.
And I put something else as number one. Something had something to do with controlling satellites in space or something like that. Um, and so anyway, so I get home, and about a week or so later, the job drop happens, and my recruiter calls me and says, "Hey, you've been matched for the job. Come on in. We'll sign your final paperwork and get you scheduled to leave for boot camp." And so I arrive at the recruiter's office, and I walk in, and he's like, "Farnsworth, who do you know, and how much did you pay him?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "In all my time of recruiting and all the time that these people up at the processing station have been there," he said, "none of them have seen this job drop. And yet you're here, and your your photography job dropped, and you got it." And he's like, "And we're all just like, we don't know how you did that. Like, who do you know, and how much did you have to pay him?" And I was like, "I don't know anybody from anybody, and I didn't pay anybody anything." And now I know that it's purely a God thing.
Hey, I was just gonna
Um,
say that. Yeah, it was God looking out for you. Giving you that. So what was it like? Did you have to learn to like do photography when you went in? Like, did they just give you a camera and say, "Hey, take photographs or whatever you want," or was there certain rules, stipulations, certain things you have
oh
to
no, you go through a pretty lengthy course
do? Okay.
at the Defense Information School in Fort Meade, Maryland, where they teach you the ins and outs of photography and how to take a properly exposed photo, and all of the rules of composition and everything, and how to do different types of photography. And the military, you're the photographer for everything. So like you could be doing. You could be doing a ceremony one day of somebody getting a certificate, and the next day you could be, you know, I don't know, you could be on a battlefield, you could be doing a crime scene, you could do it. I mean, just whatever the military needs from you,
Yeah.
you have to be able to photograph it. So you're trained in a wide variety of photographic styles.
No, that's awesome. Was there anything is there anything off limits that you couldn't photograph? No,
Nope.
no.
I've photographed just about anything you could think of.
Yeah. Were you ever in a battle doing photographs?
I never saw action while I was in Afghanistan directly.
Directly. Yeah. No, no. Okay. That's still interesting though. It's still it doesn't matter if you saw action, if just being there. And like you said, the people of Afghanistan were great. So that's one thing to my listeners when you hear this is the people of Afghanistan are great people, great people, and the people that Wesley served with were great people, and we all know that here in the states that we love our military and we support them 100%. So I know you've documented both beauty and tragedy. How did these experiences shape your understanding of God and humanity?
Yeah, standing behind a camera, and doing both funerals and celebrations, showed me how fragile and sacred life is. You know, God, though, isn't absent in tragedy, but He is present in the details. Whether it be a look, a tear, a sunrise after chaos. He's still there, and He's still present at all times. And so it taught me that faith doesn't mean avoiding pain, it means finding the purpose in it.
And yeah, accepting it and finding the purpose. Yeah, that's deep. So, how do you bring creativity and storytelling from your branding work into your ministry and authorship?
Yeah, storytelling is how I translate truth. Branding taught me how to help people see a message in a different way. They how to see themselves differently. And that's what I try and do when I help people brand, is just figure out what it is that they're trying to communicate to their audience, and then help them bring that to light in a visual way. So whether I'm writing or I'm teaching or I'm designing, the goal is still the same, just to help them recognize God's fingerprints in their story and bring it to light in a creative medium.
Yeah, it's almost like you said, his fingertips. It's almost like that poem. I believe it's Footprints.
Yep.
Where he, sometimes he's carrying you and you don't even know. Because I was lucky enough. I was born. I'm born and raised here in Boston, Irish Catholic. My dad. I was very fortunate where I went to Catholic school first through fifth. I went to private school sixth through eighth, which was a outward bound school, which was very different. It wasn't a Catholic school, but then I was able to go to private Catholic high school. So my dad put me,
Okay.
my dad put me through it all. So learning all that, and one of the things I never realized until I got older was, the sacrifices my parents made to give me that education. But the educate it wasn't just about the education. I think it was about um, focusing and keeping your mind on God, because a big thing was always for us as kids was going to Sunday mass. It didn't matter what age we were. My dad always wanted us to go to Sunday mass, and so we always went to mass. We always went to church. We always went to, like I said, Catholic school. My two older sisters went to Catholic school. Myself, I think at one point in time, my dad was probably making 70 grand a year, if that, putting three of us through Catholic high schools at 30 grand, 10,000 a piece. So I can only imagine how he did it, but uh, I thank him for that. So I know you call it
Yeah.
I know you call it a practical guide. What makes your approach practical compared to other faith-based transformation books?
Yeah. When I wrote my book, I didn't want it to just be me telling my story. I wanted it to be something that could help other people write theirs in some ways. And so in it, I look at other characters, and every chapter of the Bible, or every chapter of the Bible, every chapter of the book, the Blueprint of Becoming, includes reflection questions, journaling prompts, and tools that people can use to begin their journey to becoming. Because transformation is spiritual, and it's also intentional.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give people some ways that they can take those intentional steps in their spiritual journey, in their journey of faith, because faith grows when it's applied. And so that's what I wanted to do with this book.
Yeah, and it seems like with the book, like you said, you have some prompts in there, you have some journaling. So it seems like you really, really do lay the blueprint down for people to become on that path, And I know that's the name, the blueprint of becoming is the name of the book, but you essentially do that in the book itself, is lay that roadmap out for people to start on their own journey, which is unbelievable. Um, what part of the book was the hardest to write, emotionally or spiritually?
Um, I would say probably chapter 2 was probably the hardest one to write, because that's part of my testimony, and that's the chapter where I talk a lot about my addiction and my issues with things like codependency and anger. And so it required brutal honesty. I don't hold back. I'm very brutally honest and transparent in the chapter, because I want people to see a full picture. And so writing that was in some ways like reopening wounds.
Yeah.
But during it, God turned it into worship at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that chapter was a lot about letting the shame lose its power and just letting God be glorified through telling the story.
Yeah. So I could say that chapter 2 probably is where you became like you said, raw, honest, unfiltered. You just let them have it, that it is.
Yep.
Which is
Yep.
great, which is, again, one of the things we spoke about was to be honest with yourself. And if you're not, it's not going to start. You can't do it. So, are there any personal stories or chapters that didn't make it into the book, but you wish you could include now?
There's looking back, there's always going to be things that, man, I wish I'd talked more about this, or I talked about more about that, or whatever. And so now, as I look back, I wish I may have talked a little bit more about uh, the how I grew in my trust, my personal trust in God, um, and explored that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably left out for a reason. I'm currently writing a second book, finishing a second book, I should say, where I explore that very topic. It was not planned. It's just kind of after the book came out, I had a lot of people like, "Wow, like," and they would comment about that and like the seasons or the trials that I'm going through right now in this very moment, in my personal life, and they're asking me about my trust and how I'm able to trust God. And
Yeah.
so this book has just kind of naturally evolved as a follow on to the first one.
First one. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, as you heard him, his second book's going to be coming out. He's still finishing up now, so stay tuned. And again, the Blueprint of Becoming, you can find that at Amazon. You can find it at Wesley Farnsworth at his website, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere books are sold. So if readers could only take away one truth from the Blueprint to Becoming, what would you want it to be?
Man, if there's one thing that you took away from the book, and it would be that change is possible. And it's not because you're strong, but it's because God is faithful. And you're never too far gone to begin again. That's one thing I hear over and over again is I'm too far gone to be used by God. I can't do that because of what I've done. I can't do this because of where I come from and how I was brought up. I can't do this because this happened to me, and it's just a lot of people making excuses in a lot of ways of why they can't do something because they're holding themselves back.
Yeah.
And you just have to know that it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, what's been done to you, or how you were brought up. You can and you can be used by God, and He wants to use you. You're not determined, or you're not defined by your past. You're not defined by what happened to you. You're not defined by how you were brought up. You're only defined by who you say you are and who God says you are.
Yeah.
And so just know that change is possible.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the things too that you were talking about was I think a lot of people come up with the excuse too is that I'm too broken. I'm too broken. This broke me, that broke me, this broke me, that broke me. Everyone, and like you said, I think everyone has an excuse, but also I think it all rolls back to having to come to terms with it and being truthful to yourself. You know,
Yep.
that's when real change will start. So I know you talk about old stories versus new stories. How can someone recognize when they're still living in an old story?
If you're living and you're letting shame narrate your thoughts, then you're probably living in an old story. Old stories keep replaying lies like you'll always be this way, or God is done with you, or these people aren't going to accept you, or you're going to be rejected, and all those types of things. But the news stories, they sound a lot more like grace. And they start with things like, even now God can rebuild this, and even now God can use you. And so when you reframe your thought process and you stop living in that shame, then you've stopped living in your old story, and now you're beginning your new story.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How does failure become a necessary ingredient for growth rather than a barrier to it?
Yeah, failure humbles us. Plain and simple, failure humbles us, and humility is like the soil where transformation can grow. We have to be able to admit our failures and have some humility in order for the seeds that have been planted to be able to grow. God can't fill what's already been full, or I'm sorry, He can't fill what's already full of self-sufficiency. So we have to allow failure to empty us so that grace can rebuild us stronger.
Rebuild us and replenish us stronger. Exactly. So, how do you help people distinguish between finding purpose and chasing performance?
Yeah, that's a good question. Performance says things like, look at me, look what I've done, and purpose says, look at me, but look at what God has done through me, and the one drains you, performance will drain you. You'll get tired of it eventually. But purpose, where you're giving the glory to God and pointing people to Him, will fulfill you. And so, when peace leaves the process, you've probably crossed into performance. So if you're not at peace with whatever you're doing, then you're probably in performance mode.
Yeah, no, that puts it into perspective for me because I often find myself in my job. It's performance driven, not purpose. So
Yep.
definitely something to think about, and I appreciate that because you just a little light went off in the head. So, in what ways can shame distort someone's sense of calling, and how can they break free from that distortion?
Yeah. Yeah. Shame tells you that your failure defines you. And it's kind of what we talked about earlier. Shame will tell you that whatever it was that happened to you or you did, um, means that you can't do this or whatever. You're letting it define you. It blinds you to who you are in Christ. And the only way out of that is through confession and truth. You have to speak it, you have to name it, and you have to bring that thing into the light. And when you do that, then healing can begin. But God can't heal what we keep pretending isn't broken.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like I said, I think it goes back to a lot of people where I'm broken, but I'm not worthy of being forgiven. I'm not worthy of starting over. I'm gonna just keep down the path of this nonsense because I'm not ready to you know to man up, to become truthful and honest with myself.
Yep.
So how do you personally stay aligned with your blueprint when life gets busy or discouraging?
By returning to the basics. There's four things that I try and do every day. And this is actually a question that I get asked a lot in some way, shape, or form. So again, out on my website, wesleyfarnsworth.com/start, I actually have a PDF that you'll be able to get with these four things that I outline. So I return to the basics. I return to number one, prayer. And I have an awesome prayer life where I heard somebody tell me once that prayer is only for special occasions and meals. And I said, that's not what prayer is. Like, a prayer life is for all day, every day, 24/7, 365. Like, he should be your best friend. He should be the person that you just talk to and be like, it doesn't have to be something formal. Just be like, hey God, like, did you see that? Or, this is kind of what I'm thinking right now. And just have an open dialogue with him, all day, every day as you're going through your day.
Not to interrupt you, but I
So
think one of the biggest things too is that it's okay to pray when everything's going great.
yeah,
Because oftentimes people just, they equate, praying with someone sick or I'm sick or there's something going on in the world, there's something going on in the community. But when everything's going great, you can put your hands out, you can praise the Lord because everything's going great. It's
yep,
okay to pray to him. Like you just said, when you wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, you have a meal, you just, maybe you're having a little bad day. Maybe you're having a great day. It's always,
yep.
you can pray whenever you want, because the big man upstairs is listening.
Yeah, yeah. So, in addition to prayer, there's the scripture. Every single day I try and be in the scripture in some way, shape, or form, whether it be actually reading a passage of scripture out of the Bible or a devotional or something along those lines. There's a couple of groups I'm in Facebook that post daily scriptures, and so typically when I log in social media every day, one of them is at the top. Or I have an alert that there's one that I can go look at. So every day I try and get some kind of scripture in my life. And then I stay rooted in between all of that with music. Music is one of those things that can transcend cultural lines and political lines and all of these other lines that we put in our life. And so and it has a way of kind of burrowing itself down deep inside within you. And so because of that, um, I've given up pretty much all secular music, and I basically just listen to only praise and worship, only Christian music, Christian radio station, because I want to make sure that the songs that are, finding their way in my ears and down into my soul are ones that are edifying and pointing me back to Christ.
Yeah.
And so that would be number three, and then the final one is community. Life is better when you're connected with other people, and you're going to find more success when you're trying to beat things when you are doing it with community. I one of the things I like um, to use as an example of that is, we're now basically in the middle of November, so we're a month and a half away basically from the new year.
Yeah.
And what happens on January 1st?
Everybody
Every
makes their resolutions.
Everybody makes their resolutions, and the number one resolution that people always do,
Go in the gym.
exactly, they go to the gym and they're going to lose weight. So they make this resolution, and they're going strong, and then within a month or two they fall off because for one reason or another they don't go one day, and then they don't go another day, and then they just stop going altogether, and the gym is raking in this money because you've forgotten to cancel your subscription. And that is exactly what they count on, and that's why they offer the deals. um and but the key is they tried to do it alone. And if you do it with somebody, and now you have somebody to keep you accountable and encourage you, and you're going to meet each other on a regular basis, well, now you have a better chance of success, because neither of you one of you want to be the reason that you fail. And
Yeah.
so you're gonna show up because you don't want to disappoint the other person. You have the accountability. Well, it's the exact same thing when you think of recovery, or you think of trying to change something in your life. If you have accountability and you have somebody in your corner to encourage you, then you have a stronger chance of success. Um, and so I make sure that I have a community around me of people that will not only point me back to God, but will encourage me and keep me accountable in my recovery. Um, and I believe so strongly in that again, out on the website, wesleyfarnsworth.com/start, I've developed a free guide that actually takes my book and it turns it into a 10-week study. So you go through the book together as a group, whether it be just you and a friend or you and a few friends. But you go through the book chapter by chapter, one chapter each week. And you go through the discussion questions and everything else. And then in the guides, I have both a leader guide and a participant's guide. And you can answer the additional questions that I provide in there. Excuse me. And you go through it together, and you begin to identify in your own lives things that you might need to change. And then now, as you're identifying these, guess what you have right there around you? You have a support structure. You have a community right there with you that you can be like, this is what I've identified this week that needs to change. And now you have somebody that can encourage you and cheer you on and keep you accountable. And you, in turn, can do the same thing for them. And so I provide that guide absolutely free because I know that there's a lot of power in community. So that is, again, is available on the website.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I got a couple more questions, and then that'll be it. So, what impact do you hope your story has on veterans or others dealing with hidden trauma?
Yeah, I just want them to know that it's okay not to be okay, and that asking for help is actually strength, not weakness.
Yeah.
Especially the veterans, they think that asking for help means weakness, and that's not the truth. Asking for help is strength. Trauma doesn't disqualify you from your purpose. It actually often points to it. If my story can even help one veteran or one person step towards healing, then it's worth it.
That's worth it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, excuse me, two more questions. So, I know that November is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And you just mentioned, a lot of veterans struggle, but, a lot of men struggle day to day. And they oftentimes, the biggest thing that they say is, I'm okay. It's okay. When in reality it's not. What's a message you could give them to to let them know that it's okay to not be okay?
Yeah, and I think as men, we're wired to be the strong ones. We're wired to be the performers, to be the person that everybody else leans on, and so we put ourselves second. And you just have to realize that you're human, and it's okay to not be okay. There's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. And if you don't want to talk to another female, talk to a male. Or you don't want to talk to a female, find a guy that you can confide in. That's easier said than done, because a guy talking to another guy that they're not okay and getting touchy and feely is not going to be very easy to do.
Yeah,
And I admit that. But you know what? If you don't have somebody that you feel like you can confide in, then go to counseling. Find a counselor that you can talk to. I got involved in counseling, and when I first started going, I fought it tooth and nail, and I was there just to check a box.
yeah,
Because I was okay. I didn't need help. I was fine. It was the other people that, were encouraging me to go that they had the problem,
yeah,
you know. Um, but once I finally let my ego go, and I realized that there's, something to this, and I can actually make some changes for the better, and I admitted that it's okay not to be okay, then I started seeing transformation, and I started seeing positive changes. So yeah, if you're a guy out there and you can hear me, and just know, drop your ego. It's okay to drop it and admit that you're broken and there's something wrong, and just get the help.
yeah. Get the help. And I know here in the States, you can text or you can call 988. I believe it's 988. Let me just double check that. I believe it's 988, which is the National Crisis Hotline here in the States. And you can call that, text that. It's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 988. You can call it, you can text it 24/7. It's always manned and operated. Um, if you can't reach out to someone that you feel that you're comfortable with, this is an anonymous person. It's all anonymous. 988. You can text or call, because Men's Mental Health Awareness Month is November, and we don't want to see anybody, um, take their lives, hurt themselves because things are too deep or things are too tough. Because we um, we here at Uncle Jimmy's podcast love everybody, and we don't want to see anybody get hurt. Veterans, whoever it may be, because we are at the end of the day all children of God as well.
Amen. Amen.
You know. So, last question I have for you: what is the best advice? And I'm going to steal this from a famous podcaster, Jay Shetty, who always asks this question: what is the best advice you have heard or received in life?
Hmm. Stop hiding and start healing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Don't waste years trying to impress other people when God's already called you for a reason. So just stop hiding, start healing. Know that perfection isn't your calling, being authentic is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Wesley, thank you for being with us today and for sharing the inspiration behind the blueprint of becoming, a practical guide to faith, failure, and finding your way forward. Your message reminds us that the journey of becoming isn't about perfection. It's about persistence, faith, and the courage to rise each time we fall. To our listeners, if you're standing at a crossroads, searching for purpose, or ready to step into the next chapter of your life, this book is a roadmap filled with honesty, hope, and hard earned wisdom. Wesley's words challenge us to keep moving forward, to grow through what we go through, and to believe that our story is still being written. Wesley, thank you for lighting the way with your insight and authenticity. And to everyone tuning in, remember, your breakthrough may be just one brave step away. Until next time, keep becoming the best version of yourself. Peace and love. Peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out. Wesley, I appreciate you joining me. Any last words before we go?
Man, just like I said, know that you're not defined by your past. Your
Perfect.
your your becoming is just starting.
It's just starting. Just starting. Wesley, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And it was an opportunity of a lifetime to have you on. you've opened my eyes, and the listeners. I can't wait till they hear this, and we appreciate it. Peace and love. Peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out. Perfect, Wesley. I appreciate that, pal.
Yeah, man, it was